Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got some special guests in the building. They're here to talk about a lot, including the Indigenous People March in D.C. on the 18th. I ain't gonna mess up your name, so can you guys introduce yourselves?
I'm Natalie Farfan.
I would have had Natalie. I would have got that one. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Nat means Yineshe.
2 for 1.
Eritia Lumumba, or you can just call me Lumumba.
Well, peace. We're happy to have you all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
There's an Indigenous people, did a march in D.C. on January 18th?
That's right. January 18th, the day before Women's March, we'll be there in solidarity with all Indigenous people from around the world. This is not just Native Americans, though we got 2 brothers here that are Native American. This is Australia over there. We got Ecuador, so South, Central America, Caribbean, all Indigenous peoples, and our allies, our white allies, are welcomed.
This is the first ever time that you guys are doing this march that's really global, right?
Since the 70s was the last time that they attempted. But this is definitely bigger and I think a lot more powerful given the Trump administration and social media and everything around it.
What's the sole purpose you want to accomplish with this march?
Well,
That's a broad question, right?
it's a very broad question, but I do got some points that I want to talk about. Children, asylum, border, something that's happening right now. I just came back from Dilley, Texas, where the biggest private institution is holding mothers and children of under 4 years old. These kids are with very cold situations, no heat, little food, water that has been tested positive with arsenic. Okay, these are sick kids that are dying at the hands of our administration. Also, we have about 20,000 Native American that have been missing and murdered in America and Canada. It's a big thing. It's happening still. We're tackling Native Americans in America getting murdered at a higher rate than any other race by police. That's higher than even African American.
Wow.
Okay, we have Aboriginal people who are being murdered as well, and highest incarceration rates. Governments, banks stealing our oils. These guys are in Line 3 now, which is another pipeline separate from Standing Rock. And then again, military and police brutality that's affecting all people of color. So we're there on various different topics, but I think ultimately is how do we decolonize our minds so that we come collectively together against the bigotry and the racism that we're seeing now.
I have a question. Before we go further, when you say Indigenous people, explain that a little bit, because I don't know if Native Americans is the right term, if Indians is the right term. People don't necessarily know. So just explain that a little bit.
I want Lumumba to go into this one because he's an Afro brother, and we were in a show before this, and he's like, actually, I'm Indigenous.
Yeah, so look, I was born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I was born into a community that was founded by enslaved Africans. My mom's from the Amazon. We have a lineage, strong lineage there in the east part of the Amazon. My dad's from the Congo, in Angola. So on both lineages, I'm an Indigenous person. I practice an Indigenous spiritual system to Africa called Candomblé in Brazil. And really what it is about being Indigenous is understanding your history is beyond your colonization and beyond your slavery. And for many people of African descent, we need to understand that our history was prior to these events. And so the reason why we're coming together is because we need to recognize that we are in a global system that is interconnected and it is affecting us in very, very similar ways. So you go to Australia, you see that the Indigenous people are amongst the most incarcerated people on the planet, highest rates of youth suicide in the world. People of African descent in Australia, new communities into Australia because Australia was a country that didn't allow non-white immigration up until the mid-70s. So these new populations into Australia are facing the same issues. It's because they are Indigenous people. They are people who are seen as non-human, and that has been the case through certain laws that were put into place from the Roman expansion in the 15th century. So the reason why I'm here and the reason why we're all connecting is because we're facing similar issues all around the world, and we need to be able to unite. We're in the 4th industrial revolution where we have technology that's available to us now, and we need to find out ways that we can share different solutions to the problems that we're all facing.
Is it true? Because I read this stat like a couple years ago. Is it true that Native Americans get murdered at a higher rate in the U.S. than any other race?
Yeah, so, well, since 1492, for sure. You know what I'm saying? We were decimated from the upper 100 millions all the way down to 200,000 in 1910. The census read we had 200,000 American Indians here. And you just to go back to your question, it really is to each their own what they want to be referred to as in this country. Native American is a term that was coined up in the 1960s to describe Native Hawaiians, Alaskans, and people in this country, indigenous. Today, you know what I'm saying, we say native peoples or indigenous, you know, just to not say the word Indian anymore, right? Because Columbus was lost. But now, yeah, we're killed at a high rate by police per capita, right? So we don't have the largest population in the country. We're actually 0.8% of the population in our own country, but we're killed at the highest rate per capita.
And it doesn't get much media attention at all.
No. So you seen us the last time I was here. I came here 2 years ago during Standing Rock, and we were fighting a pipeline, and that was huge media coverage, right?
Right.
We were going up against the police. We were riding horses, and we were saying you to the government, you know. And since then, you know, that pipeline went through, and we're still fighting to this day. Donald Trump, he approved so much in our homelands, on our reservations. And when you want to talk about the front line, see, this is why we're here today, is that the front line really starts everywhere. It starts in our minds, right? And for us, we live at home with the effects of what happened with the mining. We live at home with the uranium in our water. I don't get to go back to a studio apartment or to a big major urban populated area. I go back to where our women are disappearing at a high rate due to man camps that are on pipeline routes. 1,000-man man camps in the middle of nowhere. So you don't hear about this in mainstream media because it's in the middle of nowhere. But what's in the middle of nowhere? Our Indian reservations. So our women are being taken at the highest rate and being sex trafficked out through Canada. Duluth, Minnesota is one of the main ports for sex trafficking up until to Thunder Bay, Ontario. And it all ties in together with everything, you know, our missing murdered, our men that are being killed,
high incarceration rates, you know, like in where I live in the state of Minnesota right now, 1% of the population is indigenous, and 10% of the prison population is indigenous. You know what I mean? So those numbers are really messed up. You know, you see our women are being, you know, sexually assaulted and raped at really, really high numbers. You know what I mean? 1 in 3 indigenous women or girls are going to be sexually assaulted or raped in their lifetime. You know what I mean? And these are like heartbreaking statistics, but nobody's talking about it. And that's why I really appreciate y'all like letting us come onto the show, because we get to share these statistics, because people need to know. People, you know, we're doing this march because, you know, we want to spread awareness about the realities that's happening, you know, in indigenous communities. I personally identify as indigenous, or as Dakota or Taino. I like to say my nations as well. You know what I mean? But
how do you guys feel about when you see things like, you know, I walk through the mall, and I asked you guys last time about people wearing the garb, and you know, I think somebody said it was disrespectful. You took it as disrespectful to wear your native garb. But then when I walk in the mall, I see indigenous people selling the garb, you know, or, you know, Kevin Hart having the Cowboys and Indians party, you know.
That's something I wanted to talk about, was the Kevin Hart thing, about him having and saying it's not hurtful, you know, to our people, and it's silencing us. It's these bigger voices continuing to silence us about how we feel and about the reality of what's happening, right, between Cowboys and Indians. And it's the same thing today. It's just on a bigger scale. It's us against the government. But with people wearing those things, you know, we're doing something like the Indigenous Peoples March to raise awareness about this. We're going on the Breakfast Club to inform people about who we are now in the 21st century. You know what I'm saying? I'm wearing a sweater and my sacred, that came apart, and my sacred necklace, you know, and we're here to show people who we are around the world, and that we're different, and coming together as indigenous people in 2019 is a very scary thing for the United States government. here in the United States, the last nation to militarily defeat the U.S. government was the Great Sioux Nation, the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, which we are a part of. And they begged us to sign a treaty for peace, which we did. We gave them peace, and then they killed our food supply off and made us depend on the government.
Wow.
So for us to come together worldwide as indigenous people from around the world, not just in the U.S., not just Canada, but also Mexico, Ecuador, Australia, the
Brazil,
Congo, and Africa, South America, everywhere. That's a very scary thing for the United States government.
Right.
Unity is scary.
Just on that as well. When you look back at Black history, you look at the power that identifying with your indigenous traditions has. So when you look at the Haitian Revolution, the Haitians there, they were tapping into their indigenous identity. They were tapping into the forces of nature. They were able to defeat all of the superpowers of the Western world. Now you fast forward that into the 20th century, you look at the power that Cuba was up against the United States government, and it was able to withhold and resist arguably the most powerful, the biggest superpower in the world. And if you start to look into what the Cubans were tapping into, you'll see that Fidel Castro was tapping into the indigenous African spiritual tradition of Santeria. Mm-hmm. Now, we are more than what we are being told, and we have to recognize that. And that goes for anyone of African descent, that we are indigenous, we're people of the earth. We are people that live in harmony not only with the earth, but we live in harmony with the cosmos, with the stars. We derived our identity off of that. And that's what's missing from us. We're spiritually bankrupt, and we need to get back to that. And a way to get back to that is to connect. Mm-hmm. And just quickly on that, and I have to speak on the Congo, because we wouldn't be here right now if it was speaking and using our technology right now, if it wasn't for the sacrifice that the people of the Congo are making. If you look into where we get our technology from, what minerals are used, it's the coltan in the Congo. Now we have the Black Lives Matter movement, we have the Me Too movement, we have many movements that are based off of hashtags in the digital age, and that is all off of the suffering of the people in the Congo. There's rape that is being waged against the women in the Congo. There's genocide that's taking place. 6 million people died between 1995 and 2003. Why? So we can be in this digital age and have our privilege. So we need to recognize that. And we have to understand that this is a global system, because all of our governments, the United States government, Australian government, Brazilian government, the European Union, they're all in cahoots with one another, and they are creating this web of injustice that enslaves our people on our own lands, and it enslaves us into the ghettos, in the favelas, in the barrios, okay? So we need to recognize that, and we have to dismantle this system together. We have the technology to be able to connect and share ideas, and that's what we have to do.
First of all, pass the collection plate, goddammit. All right, but how do you combat the government's attempts to, steal your land, and not only steal your land, like not to erase you?
How do we attempt to combat that?
Yeah.
Well, we do things like we stand up for ourselves, and being the lowest population in this country, that's very hard to do, and it's very hard to get our voices out there. Right now, we're coming from a pipeline fight that is funded by huge banks like Wells Fargo, that's funded by Bank of America, Chase, all these banks that are funding our genocide. And when people don't see what's happening on the reservations, who's dying of cancer, they don't see our people. We're still dying from smallpox blankets. It's just in a new form of cancer and diabetes. We have food deserts on the reservation where there's a gas station. You go to for food, where for a radius of a 200 miles, they only have a gas station to go to get food. Not
to mention the meth epidemic that they're applying to all these reservations. It's the same things that crack cocaine epidemic back in the ghettos to black people in New York. They're just doing it now to indigenous people. But ultimately, that's why this march is so important. It's not about the African American people, the Native Americans, the South Americans. It's about all of us. And truly, we're all indigenous if we're not European or white. We're indigenous people, and that's what January 18th is about. How do we come collectively? Because Charlamagne, that's your point, right? How are we really going to stop this genocide that keeps going? honestly, there's only one way, and it's a collective power.
Everybody
the only
has
way it's
to be
gonna
an
happen.
ally.
Everybody, and it's not just Native Americans. It's
Everyone
not just
has to be an ally.
everybody.
I like
and
that.
yeah, and we need white people to show up and not just be allies, but be co-conspirators. And there's a difference. An ally stands by you and tells you, hey, I got your back. A co-conspirator goes to the front lines, sends out those letters to the government, make sure that they don't invest in certain things that are against indigenous people. So
How can natives trust white people?
You know what? It's fucking hard.
For
me-
speak freely, sir.
For me, like, when it comes to any level of trust that I have with white people, a lot of that has to do with the building of relationships. You know, white people have to earn that. You know what I mean? Like, so it takes a process. In order to be an ally, all right, you better come to my movement and be able to get arrested and do some time for my movement. You better be able to make a sacrifice for my movement.
Some action.
Our movement, exactly. Because if you don't show that, then you're not a part of our movement. You're actually indeed against our movement if you're not willing to put yourself on the line. Because our people have been dying for, you know, over 500 years for this ugly decolonization movement that empowers white people, you know what I'm saying? And so in order for them to really, really earn that trust, you know what I mean, they have to be willing to make that sacrifice over and over again until we can see this whole planet decolonized.
Yeah.
Is it hard to get the platform to educate people?
It is. I mean, like, the thing is, the media isn't listening to us until they see
violence going on. So like, since Standing Rock, we had a huge following, a huge attention, all eyes on Standing Rock, and we were being shot. Like, that wasn't fun. We were being tear gassed. Like, until you taste tear gas on a daily basis, and now you feel it 2 years later, I can't breathe normal again. And Rafa got shot in the leg. He got maimed. He got shot in the leg by a tear gas canister, point blank range, by a 12-gauge shotgun, and it maimed his leg. And the eyes don't see us until we're being beaten up by police. Right. It's like everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And that's the sensational, like, media coverage. You know what I mean? Like, they want to see the police repression and violence because it's good for ratings and whatnot. You know what I mean? So it's really important, and it's really important to have these discussions now, because the Stop Line 3 movement, we're right now it's before all of the violent police repression is happening. You know what I'm saying? So we need to have more platforms like this to tell people, to educate people that there's a pipeline being ran from, you know, they're trying to run from Alberta, Canada to Lake Superior. This is the Midwest region. All of the water is at risk. This is 1/5 of the world's remaining fresh water that's at risk right now. And they're attempting to put a pipeline through our native lands.
And the privatization of water is happening right now. And this is the beginning of we just did a show with Immortal Technique in Minneapolis.
Salute to Tech.
And yeah, shout out to Tech.
Salute.
And we were talking about the water wars and how this is the beginning of the water wars, and how you see Nestle privatizing water from the Great Lakes, and how you see
PepsiCo too.
Yep, and you see how these pipeline companies are set on destroying our drinking water and aquifers to make us buy water in the future. This is going to be precious like gold in the future if we don't do something now. And it's happening right before our eyes. And it happened. It's on the reservations. Like, we still have to, at some reservations, we have to boil our water.
Wow.
We're on boil advisory. Other places, it's contaminated with uranium. Other places, like the Navajo Nation, they're protecting it from fracking right now. And a lot of their aquifer is being sent to Phoenix, Arizona, and being sold off to these cities and stolen. So it's happening right now. We're feeling the first effects of it, and it's not fun. This isn't fun. Like, it's tiring.
Well, how can people get involved if they want to get involved, if they want to support, and maybe they can't make it to the march?
But they can have their own march.
Exactly.
In their
How
own
can
city.
they support?
So we're hosting solidarity marches, and you can donate all on indigenouspeoplesmovement.com, and you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. It's at Indigenous Peoples, plural, movement.com, or Indigenous Peoples.
And there's
movement.
also going to be marches happening, solidarity marches, like in Denver, Colorado. They're organizing a solidarity march. I'm sure in other major cities they're organizing.
And it's all that information is on indigenouspeoplesmovement.com. So if you can't show up in person, show that love, spread the love from social media, donate dollars. Most of it is actually going to lodging elders that are going to be there doing prayers and speaking. And the other big portion, y'all know this, is stages and music. We're going to have music. These two fellas are going to be there performing, and many others. And so we have some celebrities coming through. And
Did you read my mind? I literally was like, so where's the money going?
Right, and so it's stage, lighting, speakers for the speakers, and a lot of it is sound, and stage, and then lodging is the other big part of it.
Permits.
Yeah, well, permits is a whole other story,
We got
but
people
Probably some
coming-
bail.
we got people coming from as far
Hopefully
as
not, but
Australia.
probably.
probably some bail, though. We don't even have money for the allocated. We're gonna have to go to pro bono lawyers once that happens. But ultimately, it's lodging, it's stage, it's food. It's also we have tents that are gonna be warmed, and that's gonna take a lot of money for us to keep them warm. So all these things, it's an infrastructure. Luckily, the Women's March is happening the day after, and they honored our march by giving us a lot of their infrastructure. So we got away with some of the permit situations because of them. And they're going to be there. They know we're going to show love to them the day after. Just to be clear, this January 18th, we're going to meet at the Building of Interior Affairs at 8 a.m. and then head to the JFK hockey field, which is the National Mall in D.C. around 9:30 and 10 a.m. 10 to 5 is the march. After that comes a concert, and you'll be hearing some of these guys over here talk. They got some good juice
And
over
also,
here.
please, like, I ask you guys, check out stopline3.org. This is a pipeline that's going through northern Minnesota that we're out fighting. Actually, we got the call to come here to do this press run while we're in Minneapolis, and we're just about to go north to check on these pipeline yards, these pipe yards that they're storing pipes, right? And to see where the progress is at. So please check out stopline3.org or go on Facebook and check out GNEW, GINEW.
Well, thank you,
And
guys.
with the day after being the Women's March and hearing the stories about all the women who have gone missing that people aren't even paying that much attention to. I was reading about in Montana.
And
They were
Montana has the highest, They just released, a study that Albuquerque is the #1 city that has missing and murdered Indigenous women, and Montana is the state that has the most. And they all get sent up to Canada, to Alberta. Alberta is a huge oil province, and the Canadian tar sands is producing oil that goes through America to a terminal in Superior, Wisconsin, that gets shipped out to other countries. So it doesn't even come here. And when they build these routes, because there's these man camps out in the middle of nowhere, it produces a high traffic rate for sex trafficking, want and need. And there's nothing else out there but Indian reservations in these rural areas.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Speaking of if now we're going to the sexual violence, there are 3-month-old babies being raped in the Congo. 3-month-old, just marinate on that for a bit. 3-month-old
at home right now.
babies being raped in the Congo so we can be in this digital age. If Black Lives matter, then they have to matter everywhere. There's some of us that are subhuman in this system. We know what it feels like to be undermined in our humanity, but there's some of us that are non-human in the Congo right now, and in West Papua right now, in the central desert of Australia right now. There's communities all over that are non-human, where some of the worst atrocities are happening. So we have to recognize that. We have to go back. We have to think about what Martin Luther King said when he said, and I'm paraphrasing,
Injustice anywhere is a threat
exactly.
to justice everywhere.
And we also have to go back to if you study the debate that Malcolm X had in Oxford just before he passed away, he spent almost a third of that debate speaking about the Congo, because he understood that is an epicenter for this system. We have to be more strategic. We're always defending our rights, defending our lands. We need to come up with a counterattack. And that's what this movement is about.
Well, make sure you go out there and support. And again, the march is January 18th, and we thank you guys for joining us
Yes,
again.
Thank you,
Indigenous
guys.
Peoples Movement.
Thank you guys for having
Thank
us,
you.
for real. It means a lot to have this platform to be able to speak and build with you guys, really.
Yeah.
And remember, it's all about decolonizing our minds. There's a lot of work to be done here, even in urban communities. We live in bubbles. We live a good life. I live in the burbs. It takes me to go to the front lines to be like, shit, I went to the asylum to see these kids to translate for young Central American moms with 3-4-month-old kids that are dying, And it's like, we have to decolonize our minds, and we have to hold people accountable that are ruining that opportunity for the youth.
All right. Well, it's the Breakfast Club. Good morning. Thank you, guys.